It's Tuesday. It's July 23rd. I am Andrew Hawthorn, and welcome to The Signal. And it's gardening day. We want your questions on garden updates or questions on gardening to begin with. Please share with us the numbers to call: 709-722-7111 or 1-800-563-8255. Our guest today is David Goodyear. He's here with us. He's been homesteading in Flat Rock for a few years now. He's turned most of his home into a food-producing machine. He's passionate about the province's agricultural potential, and he is good to go on your growing questions. How you doing, David?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
How's the homesteading going?
The homestead is busy, as usual, this time of year.
I was looking at videos of your garden, and you've got the terraces made now. That's right. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, so terracing is one way to actually slow spread and store water without having a pond or tanks to put water in.
Yeah.
So really, it's a measure to turn something that's non-producing like a hillside into something that actually can grow food or grow plants, because now you're able to store large amounts of water without having to collect it.
Sure, yeah. And you were able to do that. You just harvested like trees from around there?
Yeah, basically it was just a lot of his deadfall and stuff like that, and you just kind of set it on contour across a hillside, and you pin it into the ground using stakes, and you let some perennials and stuff take over to keep everything from eroding, and that was pretty much it. It was all free material.
Wow. Yeah. And you've got these lovely little terraces there.
Yeah, and they're great. And one's kind of a terrace to grow stuff, and the next one's a walkway, and kind of, it's all accessible.
Wow. Yeah. If you got questions for David, or you want to just share some updates about your garden, the numbers to call: 709-722-7111 or a 1-800-563-8255. We can take a text too. I'll just read it for you. You don't even have to go on air. You can text us at 709-327-8206, and I'll get that here. Or hey, you can email The Signal, thesignal@cbc.ca. David, just remind us of your setup. You have a few greenhouses now as well, right?
Yeah, so we got a winter greenhouse. We call it a winter greenhouse, although we do grow it in the summer. It's a 4-season structure, so we grow basically all seasons, and it rarely gets below 3 or 4 degrees in there in the wintertime, which just is hospitable enough for a lot of cold season crop stuff, but we're able to grow some things that most people can't. Like we have fig trees growing in this greenhouse. And we actually sell those through fixedfarm.ca.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
And do you what's the best kind of setup in terms of growing stuff in a greenhouse for this climate? Like a lot of people aren't maybe thinking about doing something on their home property. A greenhouse kind of seems like a good starter. Hey, what kind of winter we have?
Greenhouses can extend your season in kind of both directions. They can get you a longer summer.
Yeah.
They can basically extend growth into the fall. They can also extend growth into the spring. And really, for every kind of one layer of cover, you kind of increase your growing zone by one zone. So what that means is, like, we're in zone 5B. So if you can get things going in a greenhouse, it's kind of equivalent to growing the things outside in zone 6.
What does the zone mean? What does zone 5
So zone is
the
the climate or the cold hardiness zone. So that's kind of a Canadian hardiness zone map. There's a bunch of different ones, but they're agricultural zones that kind of determine, using a whole lot of climate factors, what you can grow where. So, for example, if a tree is said to be hardy to zone 5B, you'd be kind of hard-pressed to want to try to grow it in zone 3, which would, let's say, be somewhere in Labrador.
Right.
So it's really just a zoning kind of structure that allows gardeners to pick and choose what things might grow best for them where they are.
Right. Okay. Tell us about growing food instead of lawns. A lot of the stuff that you grow is stuff that has kind of an edible yield.
Yeah, I mean, so my take on yield is probably very different than most people's. My take on yield is that yield always doesn't have to be for humans. We oftentimes talk about yield in terms of the amount of food we get, but like I have many yields on my property, but I never ever see the yield. But my goal for annual food production is definitely to try to get as much out of something as I can. For me, lawns are not that thing because you get nothing out of it other than expending energy, expending time. The fossil fuel requirements to mow it, to fertilize it, to keep it this nice green monoculture is kind of not worth it to me. So I do interesting things with my lawn. This year I turned it into a squash patch. That's going to be an experiment in producing basically some what we call F1 seeds that are squash that hopefully will actually be really vigorous here, given that our climate is such that our growing season is really short. We can produce maybe some varieties that will actually, kind of size up and produce yield quicker than what they would, just if they were normal varieties.
Oh, careful knocking on the table.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah.
You're offering some workshops now as well, hey, for people who are interested in doing this kind of thing.
Yeah, so we kind of have some ongoing things in the spring. We offer a rainwater harvesting workshop. We also have a pruning workshop. A lot of people came to that one in particular because a lot of people don't know how to prune their trees, especially for fruit production. We also do a series of workshops in the summer called the Productive Home Garden. It's really aimed towards home gardeners, and solutions to get you going early would be part one, talking about layout of your garden, soil amendments, that kind of thing. Part number two is talking about your kind of mid-season stuff, looking out for diseases and pests and harvesting certain things and fertility management. And then finally in part number three, which is coming up this September, around then, it'll be basically harvesting and storage and what do you do with your carrots when you pull them? Where do you put them so you can keep them for 6 months? Those kind of questions are what we'll be talking about. And we usually have room for about 15 or so people in our workshops, and we typically post them online, Facebook, those kind of places.
How popular are these kinds of things?
In general, we've had good uptake. Like I said, we can only accommodate kind of 5 to 15 depending on the workshop. Some of the workshops are more hands-on than others, so we accommodate less people, but they're a little more pricey. Generally, they're somewhere around $45 for kind of a 3.5 to 4 hour workshop. And we've had as many as 17 people and as few as the minimum number, which we can take is 5 on our rainwater harvesting kind of hands-on workshop.
Have you seen that growing in recent years? It seems like more people are trying to grow more than just a lawn on their property.
Yeah, I mean, there's good uptake. It seems that like as long as you start advertising early enough and people kind of see it, then I feel like since COVID for sure, there's been a huge uptake. I feel in food production. People kind of get into it and then they realize, oh, I like this. So I think maybe there's a lot of people that kind of started and they just kept it going.
Wow. You're listening to The Signal. My name's Andrew Hawthorn. I'm in for Adam today, and this is our gardening show. We'd love some of your questions. I got a few here now. If you want to give a call in and ask David a question, don't ask me a question. You're not going to have a good garden out of that. But David will help. 709-722-7111. Or you could call 1-800-563-8255. You can also text us, 709-327-8206, or email thesignal@cbc.ca. I'll figure out NetSpeak eventually. Here's one question we've got. We planted an apple tree 4 years ago. We were told it would bear fruit in the 3rd year if there were another apple tree nearby, which there is. But even though it's bloomed every year, it has never borne fruit. Then this year it didn't bloom at all. It looks healthy otherwise and is growing steadily. What could be the reason that it didn't bloom? Is there anything we can do to help out?
Nature has a way with a lot of fruit trees. Fruit trees tend to bear heavily every 2nd year. The other thing is that a lot of times, yes, you do need a second variety, but there are cross compatibilities between apple trees. So, for example, apple trees have 5 blooming groups.
Okay.
And they all bloom at slightly different times. And if there's no crossover between the bloom types or the blooming types, what happens is you don't get cross-pollination.
Right.
So, for example, blooming group 1 won't bloom the same time as blooming group 3. So what will happen is that you won't get any cross-pollination because flowers are just not there when
They're on different schedules.
They're on different schedules. Okay. So, like, for example, if you choose an apple tree that's in blooming group 3, it'll be cross-compatible with a blooming group 2, 3, or 4. So anything that's in an adjacent group will work. I oftentimes have a couple of, like if you know the varieties, there are a couple of online resources. Cummins Nursery is one. There's another one, Whiffle Tree, and some other varieties. If you can't find them on those websites, you can search the varieties, and oftentimes they'll tell you what blooming group it's in. So if you see that your apple tree is in blooming group 3 and the other one is in blooming group 1 or 5, it won't be compatible. Wow. So you need to see if they're actually compatible, because sometimes they're not. There are also some trees that are what they call triploid. So most trees are diploid, but there are triploid trees. And what happens in that case is something special, that they can actually get pollen from another tree, and it'll actually make the apples, or it'll fertilize the flowers, which will give you good apples. But the problem is that they oftentimes will not be able, because they're triploid, won't be able to provide pollen to the diploid tree.
Okay.
So oftentimes then you need 3 varieties in order for you to be able to get pollination on the other tree. So apples are a bit complicated. They're not as simple as
how did anybody figure that out in the first place?
Yeah, I know. It's pretty crazy, but there are blooming groups, and like I said, Cummins Nursery is one resource online. You can look up your variety. Mm-hmm. Another one is Orange Pippin Trees. They oftentimes have basically pollination matrices that show you what works well with what.
Wow. Yep. Pollination matrices.
Yes, yeah.
I lived in Connecticut for a while, and we had orchards all over the place.
Yep.
Just go pick apples and stuff. Why don't we have that here? Is this not an apple-y place?
It's funny. There are some orchards here, and some are well established. There's one in CBS, as a fellow Jefford, that's had it there for probably 30 to 50 years. It's been there a long time. And he has a load of different varieties. Generally speaking, I think that he uses a lot of flowering crab apple trees as his pollination partners. They tend to have longer blooming times.
Okay.
So if your 2 apple trees, let's say, aren't working, you can bring those in. There's another one out around Bonavista that started up recently. I think they're still kind of in their juvenile stage yet, maybe a few years in. But they are kind of up and coming. I feel like it's something that will take off maybe eventually.
Wow. So there's nothing environmental here that would prevent an orchard or...
No, I mean, every place, has its share of pests and diseases, let's say. And I think for home gardeners, really knowing what those are, and for, commercial production, the same thing. And some places, like I know that the guy out in CBS there, Jefford, he has kind of narrowed down some varieties that really work here. And they work well on a kind of a small commercial scale. I think it's just a matter of, people realizing that it can be done and doing it.
Oh. The number again, 722-7111 or 1-800-563-8255. You can email the signal at cbc.ca. I've got some print questions here. If you don't want to go on air, that's okay. I'll read it. If you want, I can do a funny voice or something. That's okay. We're all good. We were just talking about pests there, David. You mentioned knowing what pests are around. One of those is black knot.
Oh, yes.
Tell us about black knot.
So black knot is a fungal disease that affects basically it's stuff in the prunus family. So those would be your cherries, your pit fruit. Mm-hmm. In essence, plums is a big one, right? So damsons are a type of plum. Pretty much any type of those type of plants or trees. So it can be a devastating disease. It tends to thrive in springs that are really, really wet. So it just happens that it works well here. Right?
Yeah.
It does well here. And there are local varieties of trees, like pin cherries, that really act as that basically they get infected and they kind of spread the infection to other trees that might be more domesticated, like your prunes and or your plums and your cherries. Mm-hmm. But there are varieties that are really resistant. So, for example, this is one of these cases where you kind of need to know these online resources, the Orange Pippin trees, the Cummins Nursery, the Whiffle tree. They kind of tell you what some of those disease resistances are, which you should look up before you actually go out and just buy any old tree.
Okay.
So Bluebird is a newish kind of variety of European plum that has black knot resistance, and supposedly it's resistant. There has been nobody has seen any black knot in that tree. So I brought it in this year just to test it because I do have black knot, but there are ways to mitigate it. And one way is to choose a resistant variety or varieties that offer less susceptibility than others. Tried to prune even, your pin cherries. If you see pin cherries around with it on it, prune it off, dispose of it. You can oftentimes catch black knot real early. So oftentimes the infection will happen in the spring. You'll see almost what looks like a corky growth under the bark of the tree and it's swollen, which means you don't actually have to wait until it turns black to cut it off. You can cut it off right away. And generally they tell you at least kind of 6 diameters of the branch away towards the tree is where you should cut to get rid of that branch. And some people say you should cut 6 inches or more. I've done both, and I've had good luck at, basically mitigating it in my garden for basically plums and cherries. And I haven't seen a whole lot of it. The key really is prevention, right? And keeping your tools clean. When you're pruning, keep the tools clean.
You don't want to transfer it yourself.
Yes. Now, I have heard people say that generally we tend to prune fruiting trees early in the spring before they break dormancy. And I have heard that that can actually be something that we should switch up doing in terms of pruning certain trees like anything in the prunus family. Because it can possibly lead to infection by doing that. So you wait until a time when it's dry to actually prune the tree when it breaks dormancy instead. Okay. I haven't tried that yet. Generally, I've been able to keep it under control, but some varieties just you're not able to control well. So it's all about variety selection.
Interesting. Yeah. And you've had some success trying to keep it back.
Yep. Yeah, no problem. I
got a couple.
Yeah, I got a couple varieties that are that offer some resistance. One is Methley. Another one, New York 9's a European plum that seems to be doing well. And now Bluebird. I have a Lappin's cherry that's been there now for going on 4 years, and it hasn't seen any black knot at all. And I got a Montmorency sour cherry that hasn't seen any at all either. And I've also seen pin cherries in the garden with it, but I cut it out as quickly as I see it. Sometimes I even just hack the tree down just to get rid of it. But that being said, it's everywhere, right? It's blowing around in the wind.
So you're going to encounter it, just good to react.
Yeah.
We've got somebody on the line here now. We've got Frank in Mount Pearl. Are you there, Frank?
Yes, I am.
Thanks for calling in. What's your question for David?
Okay, I just built a planter about 2 feet deep, 8 feet long, about 30 inches high, I believe. I plan to put ordinary gravelly fill in the bottom part, but what I want to know is how deep should I have the actual planting soil?
Well, so it really depends on what you're going to grow in it.
Yes.
I would say at a minimum you want at least a foot. That being said, there are fairly cheap ways to go about filling your planter, and a lot of people might not realize you don't need to fill it with gravel. I mean, you can fill it with, chunks of wood, old debris that will take a long time to rot down, sticks and branches and all those things, and they actually add quite a bit of water retention. Let's say deep down where some of the roots of the plants will get. There's kind of some methods that people call hugelkultur, where basically you kind of build a trench, you fill it with wood and logs and all that kind of stuff, and then you berm it up with soil, and Basically, it acts as food for microorganisms, and it also helps retain water in the soil. So that could be an option that might be cheaper if you got access to cuttings and wood branches and stuff like that.
Cheaper on my back too, because I'd have to wheelbarrow it all in.
Yeah, it is.
But now the other thing I want to know about that is my neighbor used to have beautiful planters, and by and large he's pretty much given up on it because cats.
Yeah.
Is there any way that short of getting a gun, that you could keep the cats away?
Wow! Don't do that though.
No, don't do that. I don't know if I'm allowed to say this on the radio, but I'm going to say it anyway.
Okay, go for it. Hot takes.
So it's funny, a lot of animals, but the problem is not the animal. The problem is usually that there's no predator for the animal. It's not to say that you need to go out and find a dog or something to kill that animal. You just need a deterrent. And honestly, I've found that urine from another animal.
Okay, I'm glad you specified
yes,
that.
Yes, will tend, and it watered down. Will tend to actually keep away certain animals, and cats it totally works on.
You can buy that in stores too, right? Wolf
you can also get it in your own backyard if you get creative by using the bathroom in a watering can.
All right. Wow.
And that works.
Hey,
it totally works.
This is getting interesting.
Yeah, it totally works. And I call it waste diversion.
That's what you call it?
That's what I call it.
Okay.
That's a good name, right? Okay, yeah, no, I have a tenant in my basement, and she has a huge dog, so I got the production source for sure. Okay, that's great. Now, I have 2 Wogelia.
Yeah.
And I love them. One just blooms like you wouldn't believe.
Yeah.
It's a little bit squat, because my daughter-in-law has one too, and hers is not squat like mine.
Yeah, you mean short.
But the other one looks like an elephant sat on it.
Yeah, so some of that may be, have you ever pruned it?
No.
Well, I mean, pruning can help shape a tree quite easily by kind of choosing where to prune so that the branches orient themselves vertically.
Yes.
Now, it could be a project that might take several years in order to accomplish that. But it's totally possible to kind of prune a tree to shape.
Yeah, are they real finicky about partial song?
Wogelias, yeah, I mean, it's possible. A lot of flowering trees tend to do well in areas that have kind of 6 hours plus of sunlight. So some of it may be driven by the fact that it sees quite a bit of shade if it's in the shade.
Yeah, now this one gets a fair bit of sun, but it does get shade in the morning.
Yeah.
Now, I have one last question for you.
Go for it.
Oh, gosh. Oh, hell.
You were blown away by that watering can thing, weren't you? I was.
Well, I kind of had my mind set on that, yes.
Yeah.
It's hard to shake off that one.
Yeah.
But,
we're all going to get through this together.
I'm planning on, because basically I'm a very lazy person, and I'm planning on doing an automatic watering system.
Like drip or soaker hose, yeah.
What's your opinion of those?
So this year, like I do a lot of annual growing, vegetables a lot of, and this year I installed a drip system. Honestly, it saves me about 20 hours a week. Where I would use that time to kind of water, but I'd also be inspecting to see if there's weird stuff on the go, or I'm seeing diseases and that kind of stuff. It does a lot of stuff. I mean, number one, it saves you time. Number two, it actually decreases weed pressure in your garden because you're typically watering directly where the plants are at rather than broadcasting. So I've noticed a huge difference in weed load this year for my annual gardens. I also use like a drip tape system to water perennials, and it works quite well. There's a good site online, Dubois Agri Innovation. They make small drip systems for homeowners that are fairly cost effective. They can be hooked up to a kind of a watering hose. They have pressure reducers and stuff on them, and honestly, 1,000 linear feet, I think it's maybe $150 or $200.
Yeah. Now, could you tell me the name of that, or the address for that, the online address?
It's a hard one. It's a French company. Just look up. Just go to Google and type in DUBOIS, and then agriculture, and it'll be one of the first sites that'll come up. And they're in Quebec. I think they're in Laval. I think.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's great.
Thanks for calling in, Frank.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, good luck. Call back next gardening show and let us know how it's going, okay?
Yes, thank you.
All right. That was Frank in Mount Pearl. Yeah, there's so many automatic systems. Hey, I've seen even automatic seeding systems, and there's people that have like robots essentially doing this stuff.
Doing this stuff. And now I tend to go for the non-technological approach. I have a water collection system that pulls water off the roof. It's all just driven by gravity.
Wow.
I open up a valve and gravity takes care of the watering. There's no timers. There's no electronics. It's all kind of very, very passive.
Wow. The number to call, the number that Frank called, is 722-7111. If you've got gardening questions, comments, queries, or anything else for David and I, 1-800-563-8255 as well. Or you could text us, 709-327-8206. We have another comment or question from Isabel in St. John's. She said that she has a rose bush. It won't bloom. She said it looks healthy, but it's just never had any flowers. What could cause something like that?
Some of it could be age. I'm not sure how old the tree is. But, I mean, that being said, like a lot of trees, you can induce vigor in them through regular pruning. It helps shape the tree, but it also rejuvenates the root system and new growth. And I mean, a lot of trees tend to put on flowering growth wherever basically new branches form. So it may just be that she needs to kind of induce some vigor in it. That's the first thing I would try.
How can you induce vigor?
Basically through pruning, regular pruning in the dormant season.
Okay.
Yeah, so, before the buds break in the spring, basically get out a set of pruning shears and trim back 20% of the tree. And there are different types of cuts, so you can go on, let's say, Google and look up heading cuts and thinning cuts, and they kind of describe visually using some images what those are. You won't ruin your tree. In fact,
you promise?
Oh, I can promise. Like, honestly, I've seen.
You haven't seen the way I prune.
I tell you, when people attend our pruning workshop, I had some people really cringing when they saw me prune the cherry tree back.
Wow.
They were like, "Oh my!" They couldn't believe how much I had. If you could see that tree now, it's absolutely beautiful. Wow. It just induces vigor, right? The tree the response is that it wants to grow more, right? It wants to put on more mass, more blooms. So I would try that in the spring.
Sounds great. We've got Frank, but a different Frank. This time from St. John's on the air. Frank, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, Frank. How are you doing today? What's your question?
Good. I'm curious as to what the sort of rust is on the chocolate pear trees around St. John's.
Rusty pears.
Yeah. So that's cedar apple rust. It's a fungal disease. It happens that Saskatoons, or chocolate pears, are kind of a mediary plant. There's just kind of multiple stages of growth of that disease, and basically it can get on that tree, and it acts as a kind of a host to kind of spread the disease further. You do get it. Sometimes it's localized to the tree. It only affects the berries. Early in the season, it's really easy to see. When the berries start to form, you'll start to see some of the berries kind of have an oblong kind of bulging section on them. And honestly, all I do is, like on a couple that I have, is I just pick the berries off and throw it away before they become something that can spread the disease further. Other than that, I just kind of let it be. There's not a whole lot really you can do about it. I don't spray fungicides on my trees. I kind of just let nature take care of itself. I'm a no-fuss gardener when it comes to perennials. I just let nature do its thing.
Anything to prevent that?
I mean, people do use a variety of dormant sprays and fungicides and stuff for trees, but for me, it's about variety selection and choosing, let's say, variety. So there are all kinds of Saskatoons that you can get that are meant more for commercial production. Lee 3, Lee 8. There's a whole list of them, and some of them may offer some resistance to that. But other than that, I just kind of let it be. It's like when people talk about things like tar spot under trees. There's not a whole lot you can do about it. You just kind of let it go through its thing, and that's about it.
Just a very Zen-like approach to this.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question, Frank?
Just about by throwing it away, you mean get it out of the garden or burn it or?
Well, so in order for typically like in order for the disease to kind of get to the next stage, the berry has to partially mature. It needs it as a host. So I just pick off the berries myself that are kind of like weird looking, and I just throw them on the ground because it can't continue to live if the berries die.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Garden, it would continue to spread like spore-wise or something.
And Frank,
I'll
the other thing is that there are Saskatoons everywhere, and regardless of whether you throw it away in your garden or not, honestly, the spores are still gonna be there. Like they're.
Oh yeah, no, I see them all around Signal Hill and the White Hills, but now they're just starting to go up here in my garden too.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
All right, I'll see if I can take care of it that way. Much appreciated. Thanks for the info. Have a great day.
You're welcome.
Thanks a lot, Frank. We've got another person on the line right now. We have Jim from Happy Adventure. Jim, are you there?
I am. Can you hear
Hello,
me?
Jim. I can hear you. Welcome to the show.
Good. Okay. Yeah, Dave, I've got a question regarding apple trees. I overheard part of what you were saying there a little while ago on the program regarding diploid and triploid, whatever. Anyway,
yes.
We planted a couple apple trees at our place here in Happy Adventure about 3-4 years ago.
Yeah.
One is a Gala Mac mix, and the other is a Honeycrisp. And anyway, last year, the Honeycrisp, they're not that big. The Mac is probably about 10 feet tall, and the other one maybe 7. Anyway, last year, our Honeycrisp was loaded with flowers, lots of apples on it for a small little tree. This year, not a flower.
Yep.
The other one wasn't too bad. The last number of years has had flowers every year, and we probably have, I don't know, a dozen apples or something on it, a lot less than we had last year. So I'm just wondering what's on the go there. It seems like the Honeycrisp, again, we've only had it for 4 years, but it seems to flower every second year.
Yep.
And the Mac Gala one seems to be flowering every year so far anyway. So just wonder if you had any suggestions there.
Yeah, no, so a lot of that's environmental and a variety. A lot of trees that put on fruit, that are fruit-bearing trees, they tend to be more biennial. They do it every second year.
Sure, yeah.
So there's not really, you're not doing anything wrong.
Okay.
It's just kind of,
wonder
it's just the way that it is. Some varieties
I was just wondering
it.
if we needed like a third tree or something like that, right?
No, those varieties are all diploid, and as long as you have them in the right blooming times, like as long as the bloom times overlap. Another option is that if you have one tree, that Mac mix that you said. If that one actually does do good blooming every year, it might be a good idea to look for a variety that does the same that you can bring in that might also kind of cross-pollinate the Honeycrisp too. Because you'll likely then get better pollination on the other tree, right?
Okay, yeah. I mean, there are a fair number of apple trees around. A lot of them are fairly old and that. So, within half kilometer sort of thing. So whatever bees are on the go, they should be providing some cross-pollination there, I would think.
They can. Right? I tell you, the bees are kind of funny. We all think that, bees are doing this great job. They don't always do a great job. They tend to hoard certain trees.
Sure.
In fact, like in the spring of the year, last week I got 3 different varieties of blackberries. Honeybees were swarming one; they wouldn't touch the other ones. They do that. Yeah, they do that. So like you could have 5 apple trees on your property, and the bees might only just be on one, and they won't go and touch the others. So
I guess they've got a preference or whatever.
Yep. Yeah, they bring that information that this nectar is good back to the hive. They do their little dance, and then everybody swarms that one tree.
Okay.
But that doesn't always happen. But bringing in another variety could help for sure.
Yeah, okay. Well, I appreciate that. And the other question I've got regarding apple trees is, when's the best time to prune them? Like in March, something like that?
Yeah, it's funny. Like here at my location in Flat Rock, apples are actually one of the last ones to break dormancy. I could almost push it to the end of May. Now, that being said, we do all of our pruning during a pruning workshop at the end of April, just because it's simple to do it for all of them rather than just kind of pick and choose.
Not a whole lot's growing then either.
Yeah, nothing's growing then across any of the trees. Even now you're kind of pushing it on the currants and gooseberries. They are starting to break around that point. But I kind of wait as long as I can and do all of them the one time during the workshop. But your apples, you could probably push. Now you are out kind of in central. I probably wouldn't push it past mid-May.
No, I mean, our weather here would be a little bit warmer than what yours would be in the springtime. Not a whole lot, but a bit, yeah. Okay, anyway, appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks a lot, Jim.
Okay. Yeah, bye-bye.
We've got Jackie from St. John's also on the line right now. Jackie, are you there?
I'm here.
Hi, Jackie. How you doing? What's your question today?
Actually, I can probably shed a bit more light on the gentleman who called about the Weigelia. And I have two 50-year-old ones in my garden.
Wow, 50.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Main comment, Dad planted them actually in the, maybe the 70s, but definitely no later than that. I find they respond really well to pruning.
Yeah.
Like good, hard pruning.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
no, that totally makes sense.
You can't be shy with them. If you're not shy, if you're when they they respond well.
Yeah.
They respond well. So Weigelias, as old as disco, respond really well to pruning.
I mean, a lot of trees do. They tend to.
I'm scared of that, though.
I know, but I tell you, see, the thing is that a lot of trees exhibit what's called apical dominance. So there's a bud basically at the top of the tree that really controls the growth of the rest of the tree.
Okay.
There's a bud, let's say, at the tip of a branch that controls how much the other branches grow. So the idea is by trimming those back, it kind of sends a signal to the tree that, hey, I got a broken branch. So, we need to fill in space to accumulate more light.
Wow.
And that all kind of just happens through pruning, because that's what the wind is doing when wind breaks branches, and all of a sudden, your willow tree cracks off, but you got all this new growth. It's a kind of a response to a natural thing, right?
And Jackie, you've just been going ham on these Weigelias, hey, and have seen a lot of growth.
Well, one just outgrew its spot, and I really I over prune. I know you're not supposed to take more than a third in the current year's back and everything, but I didn't care. I just had to get this thing to where it's living, and it's a lot bigger than it was.
Wow.
Yeah.
Here you go.
Basically, when it kills in the dormancy, I'm obviously going to have to move it, but because it's a beautiful bush, but they don't mind it. Speaking from my experience, they don't mind it at all.
All right.
Yeah, totally makes sense.
You're inspiring bravery, Jackie. Thank you very much.
Okay, talk to you later. Bye.
Thanks for calling in. 722-7111, 1-800-563-8255. If you have gardening questions or if you have gardening comments, I'd love to hear more folks like Jackie, too, who can go in and tell me if I take an axe to my lilacs, it'll be all right. I have a lilac tree that is totally out of control in my backyard.
Yeah.
Is it okay for me to just cut that thing down?
Yeah,
that seems nuts.
in fact, like a lot of these trees kind of have a very kind of specific lifetime length.
Okay.
They will die eventually. They'll succumb to environmental factors,
I don't want it to
fungi
die.
and stuff.
I just want it to be small.
But actually, if you want it to be smaller, or if you want to induce vigor so that it stays around for, let's say, double its lifetime, if you just leave it unchecked, pruning is the way to do it.
Pruning is the way to go.
Yeah, pruning forces juvenile roots. It forces new growth. It cuts back disease stuff. It does a lot of stuff for a tree. There are whole forest management techniques that depend on basically hacking a tree down to kind of ground level. In the UK, they have these basically stands of hazelnut forests where they go in and they cut a tree basically off. They leave what's called a stool on the ground, and from the stool shoots all new branches.
Wow.
And these forests are like hundreds of years old, using these types of forestry management techniques. So, I mean, you can cut some trees almost down to the ground. Others, you can just prune them back, and it just induces vigor. Yeah.
It's incredible. We've got a text message in here. Hi, David. My tomatoes are forming on the vines. So what can I add now to promote fruit development? Also, what fertilizer can I add to garlic or onions to promote bulb enlargement? How about invigorating some vegetables?
Yeah, so for tomatoes, like flowering and fruit production, you're talking mainly phosphorus, potassium. So something that's kind of more weighted towards that. So let's say early in the season, maybe something like a tomato fertilizer. I think usually it's like a 12-12-12. You can get it 20-20-20. Sometimes it has some micronutrients in it. But this time of the year, if your plants are already kind of grown to height and you need just for flowering and fruiting, you want to kind of make sure that the NPK, the N one is like a little lower than the other ones, so that maybe you got like a 5-10-15 or a 5-15-15 would work well for those.
Okay. All right, and
and the garlic. This time of the year, I wouldn't fertilize anything with garlic. It's a little too late. So
when would you do a garlic?
Garlic, I would do it at emergence in the spring. I would do fertilization probably every 2 weeks up until around the 21st of June or so. After that, once scape formation happens, you're better off not fertilizing. It can cause a load of other issues. I know, fertilizing with nitrogen-based fertilizers can cause certain environmental things to happen, like what we call witch's brooming. There's an indicator that it causes that, which makes your bulbs actually start to sprout secondary shoots up through where the other shoots are. And they become hard to dry down. They don't store well. So this time of the year, my garlic, I haven't fertilized it now in probably 3 weeks, and I won't. Not until harvest. Harvest, and then when it comes out, it's done. That's it.
When are you harvesting garlic?
So escapes emerged and were picked about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. I generally wait until I have kind of 5 to 6 good leaves left on a porcelain variety, so most people will be growing music. Excuse me. And so that'll be probably this year, maybe mid-August, mid to third week in August, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
This gent growing tomatoes, garlic, and onions, his whole place must smell like great bruschetta. Right. Another text question. Please ask David, what is required to encourage more fruit development on pepper plants? I have flowers, not many peppers forming. That seems to be a theme of today's show, flowers and no fruit.
Yeah, so flowers and no fruit can be caused by a bunch of environmental factors. I mean, not getting sufficient pollination is typical of what would cause you not to have fruit formation. There's a bunch of tricks online. You can go around with a little brush and kind of brush each flower.
Brush the flowers?
Yeah, so they tend to be self-pollinating. But sometimes, depending on the shape of the flower, they need to get the pollen from one part of the flower to where the reproductive part is. Simply shaking the plant, making sure there's a fan running in the greenhouse, moving air so the pollen is kind of moving around, especially if your greenhouse doesn't have any type of pollinators in it like mine. Basically, I just go in every day, and as I'm walking around the greenhouse, I give my plants a shake.
Wow.
And that's usually enough to encourage pollination.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Get out there, give your peppers a shake.
Yeah.
See what happens. We've got another text question. This is about beets. I want to thin out the beets. Can you transplant the ones you take out?
Can
you split a beet?
Not really. It's like the thing is that the beet has a tap root, but there are all these fine root hairs that are attached to it. And it'd be hard to transplant them, especially this time of the year. You would need to have, them covered, the very little sun. You need to kind of minimize, transpiration of moisture through them. It's just not worth it. I can't see how it would. You're better off just pulling them and feeding them to the chickens if you got chickens.
Drop the beets.
Yeah, drop the beets.
Check. 722-7111 or 1-800-563-8255. You can text us too. That's where I'm getting these questions from. Folks are texting us in 709-327-8255. 206. Another text question. What does your guest think about picking flowers from potato plants? Says Don from Salmon Cove. Picking flowers from potato plants?
I mean, there's this thought that picking flowers somehow affects tuber formation.
In a good way. So you want more potatoes, you pick the flowers.
Yeah, and I think that's where this question is coming from. From what I recall and what I've read, that is not the case. You can just let the flowers be. Commercial farmers do it. It's not going to affect your yields noticeably at all.
Doesn't do one thing or another?
No, it doesn't. Now, the only thing is, of course, is that if you leave the flowers and they do get pollinated, you get these little fruit that form, and they look almost like tomatoes. And this time of the year, on the backyard farming group on Facebook, and there's another couple other ones, people are like, "What is this growing on my potato plant? It looks like a mini tomato." Well, it kind of looks like a mini tomato because tomatoes and potatoes are in the same family. So the fruit, which is the potato berry, is actually the fruit of the potato plant, and it actually contains the true seed of the potato. Okay. The potato, although we propagate it using seed potatoes aren't seeds, they're tubers. The tubers produce a clone of the original parent.
Okay.
Seeds are actually true seeds. They're like a little seed, and you would plant them, and you'd get a potato plant.
Okay.
Yeah, which has its own genetics in it. It's not a clone. It would be potentially cross-pollinated with other varieties in your field. So when you plant the seeds, you'll get a potato plant, but you don't know what the variety will be. It's going to be something, but it may not have the same qualities as the parent. So pulling them off could prevent you from having a whole lot of potato berries and plants popping up in the spring, which I have seen in my garden on years when I get good potato plant pollination. But I always just kind of, pick them up as weeds and kind of just throw them away because you don't know what you're going to get.
Wow. Okay. So when you're talking about propagating like seeds versus like the eye of a potato, like if you put a cutting down there, that's just a clone?
That's a clone, yeah. That's just like basically you took the original parent and you cloned it.
Wow.
Yeah. So if let's just say you're out in your garden, you're growing Yukon potatoes.
Yeah.
That Yukon potato is a clone of everyone that's in that field is a clone of the original parent.
Wow.
Right? So you're grown a field of clones. And
is that good? That doesn't seem healthy.
It's fine. The issue that you run into is that variety, because they're all clones, are all susceptible to the same stuff.
Okay.
Because they're genetically identical.
You want a nice mix in there.
In some cases.
Yeah.
If you don't care about uniformity, and
I don't.
And yeah, like there's a lot of reasons to actually, let's say, produce seed that's not uniform. Those would be called, let's say, F1 seeds or hybrid seeds. So there's a lot of varieties of seed on the market that are hybrid seeds.
Yeah.
Tomatoes and peppers, and you see these ones says F1 hybrid. When you see that, it's not GMO. GMO's not available to me or you or anybody that's calling in here today unless you're a farmer that signed a contract with Monsanto.
Right.
Like it's just not available to people. But F1s are great in some cases. They can have some uniformity, but they may have like crazy vigor. So they grow really, really quick and produce fruit really, really quick. So in a climate like ours, I go for a lot of F1s when I grow. Okay. I know that I might not be able to keep the seed because the seed may not have great genetics anymore, but the seed right now does. And it produces food way, way quicker in some cases, depending on the quality that they kind of teased out from that variety.
We've got a question here from Paul, and you should. I'm interested to hear your answer on this because you just planted a new black knot resistant plum tree a little while ago. At what point in summer should I fertilize my plum tree?
I don't fertilize anything. Perennial systems basically require, low inputs. If your soil is decent and it has a good amount of organic matter, basically, you can do this semi-passively. Plant some broad beans around the base. Let them rot back in the fall. You've got probably enough nitrogen to feed your tree. Wood chips. Wood chips inoculated with fungi break down wood chips, and they help feed perennial systems quite well. They also help keep moisture in the soil. They prevent grass from kind of invading. And honestly, it provides all the nutrients you would really need, a good mulching. That's really all I do for fruit trees. I never, ever apply fertilizer or nothing like that to any of those systems.
What kind of, if somebody's just getting in this out of nowhere, what kind of fruit trees should we go to? We've talked a bit about plums. We've talked a bit about apples.
Yeah.
What kind of things should people be going for in this?
It's funny. There's a lot of interesting varieties of fruit-producing berries and trees bushes and trees that are that grow well here. Honeyberries or haskaps are one. Blackberries, raspberries are another. Just trying to think. Kiwi berries. A lot of people don't realize you can grow
kiwi berries.
Yeah, you can grow 2 varieties of kiwi berries. They're actually a member of the kiwi family.
Okay.
But they form these little hairless kiwis that are more like the shape of a small kind of grape tomato, but they're shaped like a kiwi and they taste similar to a kiwi, only better flavored than a kiwi.
Wow.
They grow as a vine. Actually, a bine, not a vine, which is actually a different.
What's that?
Yeah, so a bine is actually a kind of like a vine, only rather than it having tendrils, it spirals. So, like for example, a hop would be a bine, not a vine.
Really?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So they tend to spiral in order to be able to grab a hold of things rather than having tendrils to kind of grab a hold of things. Like grapes are vines, for example.
Right.
Bindweed is actually a vine, I believe, because it doesn't have tendrils.
You need tendrils to be a vine.
Yes, that is correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but there's a load of other things that work well here. Apples, if you choose the right varieties, try to find varieties that are scab resistant.
Sure.
There's a couple that come to mind. Williams Pride, I believe, is Freedom is another. But once again, go to these resources that I said online. A lot of them have a load of different fruit and berry producing trees. Cummins Nursery is one. Whiffle Tree is another. Orange Pippin Trees is another. And they will tell you basically all the disease resistances for all of these varieties of things. And that way you can pick and choose based on what diseases people see in your area.
Okay. We've only got a couple minutes left. We do have one more question, though, and this is the reverse of what you were doing because you just replaced your lawn with a squash patch.
Yeah, super.
This gent is asking, I want to put in a small lawn. How deep should the soil be? What's the best seed to use for that?
Yeah, so if you're talking about creating a new lawn from scratch, I would start off with at least 6 to 8 inches of good topsoil. It needs to have something in there to hold water, so something organic. Typically, it's peat that's in it, even a triple mix if you got it. Make sure that you seed with multiple varieties of grass. I would use an annual ryegrass, a couple types of fescue, and maybe a bluegrass. I would even possibly overseed with a bit of clover. Polycultures tend to do better than monocultures. And at that point, then the ryegrass will grow. It'll help prevent erosion. It'll help retain moisture in the soil. And you'll get a decent lawn out of it in year 1. But then in year 2, the perennial grasses will take over. Mm-hmm. The other thing is make sure that you spread at least 10 pounds of lime per every 100 square feet. Initially, and then 5 pounds for basically every year after that for maintenance. Start off with a 6-12-12 fertilizer spread at, I think you want about 3 pounds or maybe it's 2 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet.
You just have all these figures right off the top of your head.
Yeah, but now I haven't planted a lawn in a long time, but it's somewhere around, 2 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet, I think, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hope that helps out. We're almost out of time. Lightning round question. How do I get a mock orange shrub to bloom? I've thinned it out and added extra lime. No blooms. Stanley and Clarenville.
Oh, that's interesting, actually, yeah.
Help their mock oranges.
When she says thinning it out, maybe thinning cuts are not what you need to do, but heading cuts are what you might need to do.
There you go.
So I would have to look up the mock orange. I've never seen that one. So
that's neat. I've never even heard of it either. That's the end of our show here. David, thank you so much for coming on and answering these questions. Where can people find you online?
So generally on Facebook at the Homestead of Flat Rock. I also have a YouTube channel called the Homestead of Flat Rock.
You got to check out those videos. It's very inspiring. I might even try to grow a potato myself. Thank you so much, David. That is your signal. Tomorrow, it's our annual Summer Reads show. I hope you come back and join us. We've got some publishers, some librarians talking about what hot books are up there. We've got some hot reads. You can write in with them as well. My name's Andrew Hawthorn. I hope you have a great Tuesday.